In the grand houses of Victorian England, where polished silver gleamed under candlelight, and every movement seemed choreographed to perfection, the lives of servants unfolded according to a set of rules that were rarely spoken aloud, yet always understood with absolute clarity, forming an invisible code that governed their every action, thought, and even presence, shaping a world in which they existed both at the heart of the household and yet somehow entirely outside of it, unseen and unheard, unless required, their identities quietly dissolving into the smooth functioning of the estate they served. For one of the most important expectations was the art of invisibility, a skill that demanded servants move silently through corridors, anticipate needs before they were voiced, and disappear the moment their task was complete, ensuring that their employers could live in a world untouched by the mechanics of labour. And this invisibility extended beyond physical presence into emotional restraint, as servants were expected to suppress their own feelings, never displaying irritation, fatigue, or personal distress, no matter how long their hours or how heavy their burdens, because the comfort of the household always came first, and even a fleeting expression of discontent could be interpreted as a breach of decorum. Another unspoken rule that defined their existence was the rigid hierarchy among servants themselves, a social structure mirroring that of the family above them, where each role from the butler to the scullery maid carried its own level of authority and expectation, and stepping beyond one's position, even in small ways, could lead to reprimand or dismissal, reinforcing a system where ambition had to be carefully masked, and advancement was earned only through years of quiet obedience. And within this hierarchy, communication was often indirect, as junior servants learned quickly to read subtle cues from their superiors, understanding instructions that were never explicitly stated because efficiency depended on intuition as much as instruction, while loyalty was perhaps the most deeply ingrained expectation of all, requiring servants to protect the privacy of the household at any cost, never revealing the secrets they witnessed, whether they were minor indiscretions or major scandals, for the reputation of the family was intertwined with their own. Employment and a single act of betrayal could end a career not only in one house, but across an entire network of employers who relied heavily on references and reputation. And yet, despite this expectation of unwavering loyalty, servants themselves were rarely granted the same trust, as they lived under constant observation, their behaviour scrutinised for any sign of impropriety, their personal lives tightly controlled, often with restrictions on friendships, relationships, and even the time they were allowed to spend outside the household, creating a paradox where they were entrusted with the most intimate details of their employers' lives, while being denied autonomy over their own, and even the simplest actions were bound by etiquette, such as the way a servant entered a room, always with a slight knock and a pause, allowing the occupant to acknowledge their presence, or the precise manner in which they addressed members of the family, using formal titles and avoiding direct eye contact unless spoken to gestures that reinforced the social distance between them, and clothing too became a silent language of discipline and identity, as uniforms had to be immaculate at all times, not only reflecting the status of the household, but also serving as a constant reminder that the individual wearing them was part of a system larger than themselves, and personal expression was quietly discouraged, as even small deviations in appearance could be seen as a lack of respect or discipline. While time itself was not their own, structured around the needs of the household, beginning before dawn and often stretching late into the night, with little regard for personal rest. Yet despite the relentless schedule, servants were expected to maintain an air of calm efficiency, never appearing rushed or overwhelmed, because the illusion of effortless service was as important as the service itself. And mistakes, though inevitable in such demanding conditions, were treated with varying degrees of severity depending on their nature, with minor errors often corrected through subtle disapproval, while more serious lapses could result in immediate dismissal, a consequence that carried significant weight in a society where employment opportunities were closely tied to reputation. And perhaps one of the most emotionally complex rules was the expectation of detachment, as servants often spent years in close proximity to the families they served, witnessing their joys, sorrows, and everyday lives. Yet they were expected to remain emotionally distant, forming no attachments that might blur the boundaries of their role. A difficult task in a world where human connection is natural, and yet necessary to preserve the structure that defined their place within the household, and even moments of kindness from employers, though appreciated, were carefully navigated, as they could never fully bridge the gap between service and status, leaving servants in a space that was both intimate and distant, valued yet invisible, essential yet unacknowledged. And within this delicate balance, they learned to adapt, developing a quiet resilience that allowed them to endure the demands of their position while finding small moments of personal satisfaction in a job well done, in the smooth running of a household that depended on their unseen efforts, and in the subtle recognition that, though their names might not be remembered, their work formed the very foundation of the world they served, a world that without them could not exist in the polished, effortless form it presented to the outside. And so the unspoken rules, though restrictive, became a framework within which they lived, shaping not only their actions but their identities, creating a hidden narrative of discipline, endurance, and quiet strength that remains an integral yet often overlooked part of history. And yet beneath the polished surface of duty and discipline, there existed an even deeper layer of unspoken understanding that governed how servants navigated not just their work, but their very sense of self, for they lived in a world where identity was something to be carefully managed, almost hidden, shaped entirely by the expectations of those they served. And one of the most subtle yet powerful rules was the necessity of anticipation, an almost intuitive awareness that allowed a servant to act before a command was given, to refill a glass just before it emptied, to adjust a curtain as the sunlight shifted, to prepare a room moments before it was needed, creating an atmosphere where the household appeared to function effortlessly, as though guided by an invisible hand. And this expectation demanded constant alertness, a quiet vigilance that left little room for distraction, because even a moment's lapse could disrupt the delicate illusion of perfection that defined upper-class life. While another quiet rule lay in the management of sound itself, as footsteps had to be soft, voices low, doors opened and closed with care, and even the clatter of dishes was to be minimized, ensuring that the presence of servants never intruded upon the peace of the household, turning silence into a skill as valuable as any physical task. And within this silence, communication often became a language of glances and gestures, a shared understanding developed over time among servants who worked side by side, allowing them to coordinate their efforts seamlessly without drawing attention, creating a rhythm that was both efficient and almost invisible to those they served. There was also an unspoken expectation of adaptability, as servants were required to adjust not only to the routines of the household, but also to the moods and personalities of their employers, learning to read subtle shifts in tone or expression, understanding when to be present and when to withdraw, when to offer assistance and when to remain in the background, a delicate balance that required emotional intelligence as much as practical skill. And this adaptability extended to the ever-changing demands of social life, as dinners, gatherings, and unexpected guests could transform the rhythm of the household at a moment's notice, requiring servants to respond quickly and efficiently, often working long hours without complaint, because flexibility was not just valued, it was expected, and any sign of resistance could be seen as a failure to fulfill their role, while another quiet rule governed the concept of pride, a complex emotion in a world where recognition was rare, as servants were expected to take satisfaction in their work without seeking acknowledgement, to find meaning in the smooth operation of the household, rather than in personal praise. And this required a shift in perspective, a redefinition of success that placed value on precision, reliability, and consistency, qualities that often went unnoticed, but were essential to the functioning of the estate. At the same time, there existed an unspoken boundary between familiarity and distance, a line that servants had to navigate with great care, as they were often privy to the most intimate aspects of their employers' lives, from private conversations to personal routines. Yet they were expected to remain detached, never allowing this proximity to translate into familiarity, never overstepping the invisible line that separated service from equality. And this boundary was reinforced through countless small actions, from the way a servant stood in a room to the tone they used when speaking. And still, beyond the routines that could be seen and the expectations that could be felt, there existed an even quieter layer of discipline that shaped how servants thought about themselves, a kind of internal rulebook that followed them even when no one was watching. For one of the most deeply ingrained expectations was that of self-erasure, the idea that their personal desires, opinions, and even identities were secondary to the smooth functioning of the household. And over time, this was not simply enforced from the outside, but absorbed from within, becoming a natural way of being, where a servant would instinctively step aside, lower their gaze, or hold back a thought before it was ever spoken, creating a life lived in careful moderation, where every word and gesture was measured against an invisible standard of propriety. And yet, within this restraint, there was also a remarkable level of awareness, as servants became highly attuned to the rhythms of the household, noticing the smallest details that others might overlook, from the slight change in a master's routine to the subtle tension in a room before a disagreement, allowing them to respond with a precision that often went unrecognized, but was essential to maintaining harmony. There was also an unspoken rule surrounding memory, a quiet expectation that servants would remember everything that mattered while forgetting everything that did not, holding in their minds the preferences, habits, and schedules of those they served, from how a particular dish was to be prepared to the exact arrangement of items in a room, while at the same time allowing no trace of personal judgment or curiosity to linger, creating a kind of selective awareness that was both practical and protective, ensuring that the household ran smoothly while preserving the boundaries that defined their role. And this memory extended not only to tasks but to people, as servants were often expected to recognize guests, recall their preferences, and anticipate their needs, even if they had only visited once before, turning memory into a form of quiet service that added to the illusion of effortless hospitality. Another subtle expectation lay in the management of presence, not just in terms of visibility, but in the way a servant occupied space, always aware of where they stood, how they moved, and how they positioned themselves in relation to others, ensuring that they never blocked a path, interrupted a conversation, or drew unnecessary attention. A constant negotiation of space that required both awareness and discipline, and this extended to the timing of their actions, as tasks were often performed at moments when they would cause the least disruption, creating a seamless flow that allowed the household to function without interruption. And within this flow, servants learned to adapt to changes with remarkable flexibility, adjusting their routines as needed while maintaining the appearance of consistency, a skill that required both planning and intuition. There was also an unspoken understanding of endurance, a quiet acceptance that the demands of the role could be physically and emotionally taxing, yet were to be met with resilience rather than complaint. And this endurance was not simply about withstanding long hours or difficult tasks, but about maintaining a sense of composure and professionalism. In all circumstances, whether dealing with a demanding employer, an unexpected crisis, or the simple weariness of daily labour. And in this way, endurance became not just a necessity, but a defining characteristic of service, shaping how servants approached their work and how they understood their place within the household. At the same time, there existed a delicate balance between individuality and conformity, as servants were expected to fit seamlessly into the structure of the household, while still bringing a level of skill and personality to their work. And this balance was often expressed in small, subtle ways, in the care taken to complete a task, in the quiet pride of doing something well, or in the relationships formed with fellow servants, creating a sense of identity that existed within the boundaries of the role rather than outside of it. And these small expressions of individuality, though rarely acknowledged, were an important part of maintaining a sense of self in an environment that often demanded conformity. Another unspoken rule governed the passage of time itself. As servants lived in a world where the present moment was always shaped by the needs of others, their schedules dictated by the routines of the household, and yet within this structure they developed a keen awareness of timing, understanding not only when to act but when to wait, when to step forward and when to remain still, creating a rhythm that was both precise and adaptable. And this sense of timing extended to their own lives as well, as many servants viewed their work as part of a larger journey, a step toward future opportunities, or a means of achieving stability, giving their efforts a sense of purpose that went beyond the immediate demands of the role. And perhaps most quietly of all, there was an unspoken sense of dignity that underpinned their work, a recognition that despite the lack of recognition or status, their role was essential, that the smooth operation of the household depended on their efforts, and that within the structure of service there was room for skill, dedication, and even a form of quiet pride, a dignity that was not given but earned through consistency and care. And this dignity, though often invisible to those outside the world of service, was deeply felt by those within it, providing a sense of meaning that helped to sustain them through the challenges of their daily lives. In the end, the unspoken rules of Victorian servants were not just a set of restrictions, but a complex system that shaped how they lived, worked, and understood themselves, creating a world that was both demanding and structured, limiting, and yet in its own way defining, and within this world, servants found ways to navigate their roles with skill and resilience, balancing the expectations placed upon them with their own sense of identity, and in doing so, they became an integral part of the households they served. Their presence felt in every polished surface, every carefully prepared meal, and every moment of quiet efficiency, leaving behind a legacy that, though often overlooked, remains a testament to their strength, adaptability, and quiet endurance. And even beyond these layers of discipline and quiet endurance, there existed a deeper, almost philosophical understanding that shaped how servants moved through their world. An awareness that their role required not only action but constant restraint, a careful holding back of impulse that became second nature over time. For another unspoken rule was the mastery of neutrality, the ability to remain unaffected on the surface regardless of what unfolded around them. Whether it was tension at the dining table, whispered disagreements behind closed doors, or moments of unexpected joy, all of which had to be witnessed without reaction, acknowledged without acknowledgement, creating a presence that was steady and unchanging, almost like part of the architecture itself, reliable and constant. And this neutrality extended to their own opinions, which were rarely voiced and often quietly set aside, as the household did not require their perspective, only their service. And yet within this silence there was a kind of quiet observation that allowed servants to understand the world around them in ways that others might not. Seeing patterns, noticing contradictions, and developing a depth of awareness that came from watching without being seen. There was also an unspoken expectation surrounding consistency, a demand that each day's work be carried out with the same level of care and precision as the day before, regardless of fatigue, mood, or circumstance, creating a rhythm that was both predictable and relentless, where excellence was not a moment, but a standard that had to be maintained at all times. And this consistency was what allowed the household to function smoothly, as every task, no matter how small, contributed to a larger system that depended on reliability. And within this system, even the smallest deviation could be felt, making attention to detail not just a skill but a necessity, while another quiet rule governed the idea of preparedness, as servants were expected to think ahead, to anticipate not just immediate needs but future ones, ensuring that everything was in place before it was required, from laying out clothing to preparing rooms, creating an environment where nothing seemed out of order. And this forward-thinking approach required both experience and intuition, as it was not always possible to predict every situation. Yet the expectation remained that they would be ready, none the less. At the same time, there was a subtle rule about discretion in movement, not only in how quietly one walked, but in how one entered and exited spaces, how one positioned oneself during tasks, and how one avoided disrupting the natural flow of the household, turning even the simplest actions into a form of practiced grace, where efficiency and elegance were intertwined, and this grace was not merely aesthetic, but functional, as it allowed servants to perform their duties without drawing attention, reinforcing the illusion that everything simply happened as it should, without effort or interruption. And within this illusion, the role of the servant became both essential and invisible, a paradox that defined much of their experience. Another unspoken rule lay in the acceptance of uncertainty, as servants often lived with little control over their future, their employment dependent on the stability and preferences of the household. And even after all these quiet disciplines had been absorbed into habit, there remained another layer of expectation that shaped the inner rhythm of a servant's life, one that was less about action and more about perception. For servants were expected to understand not only what was required of them, but why it mattered, to grasp the importance of each small task within the larger image of the household. And this created a mindset where even the simplest duty carried weight, where polishing a surface or arranging a table was not merely routine, but part of preserving a certain atmosphere, a sense of order and refinement that defined the identity of the home itself. And within this understanding, servants developed a kind of quiet purpose, a recognition that their work, though often unnoticed, contributed to something greater than themselves, giving meaning to repetition and structure to their days. There was also an unspoken rule about emotional balance, a delicate art of feeling without revealing, where servants learned to experience their own emotions in private while presenting a composed exterior at all times, ensuring that personal feelings never interfered with their duties, and this required a level of self-control that was both demanding and deeply ingrained, as even moments of personal hardship had to be set aside in the presence of the household, creating a separation between inner life and outward behaviour that could be difficult to maintain, yet was essential to the role, and over time this separation became second nature, a quiet strength that allowed them to navigate both their responsibilities and their own experiences with a steady hand. Another subtle expectation lay in the idea of continuity, the understanding that the household must remain consistent, regardless of change, and that servants played a key role in maintaining this stability, whether it was during times of celebration or moments of uncertainty, ensuring that routines were preserved and that the environment remained familiar, dependable. And this sense of continuity extended beyond individual households, connecting servants to a broader tradition of service that carried its own values and expectations, creating a shared culture that was passed down through experience and observation rather than formal instruction. There was also an unspoken awareness of observation from both directions, as while servants were constantly observing the household, they were also aware that they themselves could be observed at any moment, creating a state of continuous attentiveness where behaviour had to remain consistent, regardless of whether anyone was watching, reinforcing the idea that discipline was not situational but constant, a part of one's character rather than a temporary performance. And this awareness encouraged a level of professionalism that extended beyond specific tasks into the overall manner in which one carried oneself, shaping posture, tone, and movement in subtle but significant ways. At the same time, there existed a quiet rule about restraint and curiosity as servants. Though often exposed to the private lives of their employers, were expected not to question, interpret, or dwell on what they saw, maintaining a respectful distance that preserved the boundaries of the household, and this required a careful management of attention, focusing on what was necessary for the task at hand, while allowing other details to pass without engagement, creating a balance between awareness and detachment that was central to their role. Another unspoken principle governed the idea of readiness, not just in terms of physical preparation, but in mental and emotional availability, as servants were expected to respond quickly and effectively to changing circumstances, adapting to new situations without hesitation, and this readiness was cultivated through experience, building a confidence that allowed them to act decisively while maintaining composure, ensuring that the household could rely on them in both routine and unexpected moments. And within all these expectations there was a quiet understanding of time not as something owned, but as something given, where each hour was shaped by the needs of others. And yet within this structure, servants found ways to create a sense of flow, moving from one task to another, with a rhythm that brought a kind of order to their day. And this rhythm, though demanding, provided a sense of stability, a predictable pattern that offered comfort even within a life of constant service. Finally, there was an unspoken sense of legacy, a recognition that their work, though often anonymous, contributed to the enduring character of the household, leaving behind traces not in name but in experience, in the smoothness of daily life, in the comfort and order that others took for granted. And this legacy, though quiet, was meaningful, a testament to the skill and dedication that defined their role, and through it, servants became part of a larger story, one that extended beyond individual lives and moments, weaving together countless acts of care and precision into a continuous thread of history. In this way, the unspoken rules of Victorian servants formed not just a system of behaviour, but a way of being, shaping how they moved, thought, and understood their place in the world, creating a life that was at once constrained and purposeful, demanding and quietly fulfilling. And within this intricate balance, they found a form of strength that allowed them to endure, adapt, and contribute to a world that depended on their presence, even if it rarely acknowledged it, leaving behind a legacy defined not by recognition, but by the quiet perfection of a life lived in service. And still, beyond the visible routines and the quiet disciplines already woven into their lives, there existed an even subtler expectation that shaped how servants experienced the passage of each day, a kind of mental alignment with the household itself, as though their thoughts and actions had to remain in harmony with the rhythm of the home. For another unspoken rule was the quiet surrender of personal pace, the understanding that one's own sense of time must adjust entirely to the needs of others, meaning that moments of rest could never be fully claimed, only borrowed, always subject to interruption. And this created a state where readiness was constant, where even in stillness there was a lingering awareness that one might be called upon at any. And over time, this awareness became a natural part of being, a background presence that shaped how servants relaxed, spoke, and even thought, ensuring that their connection to the household was never fully set aside. There was also an unspoken expectation of emotional invisibility in moments of contrast, particularly when servants found themselves surrounded by the comforts and privileges they themselves did not possess, as they moved through rooms filled with warmth, abundance, and refinement, yet were expected to remain unaffected by comparison, never allowing longing, envy, or reflection to surface, maintaining instead a steady neutrality that preserved the balance of the household. And this required not only discipline, but a quiet form of acceptance, a way of acknowledging difference without allowing it to disrupt one's role, creating a mindset that focused on function rather than contrast. And within this mindset, servants learned to navigate a world that was both close and distant, familiar yet not their own. Another subtle rule lay in the preservation of atmosphere, an understanding that the household was not simply a place, but a carefully maintained environment, where mood and tone were as important as physical order, and servants played a central role in sustaining this atmosphere, adjusting lighting, maintaining cleanliness, and even moderating their own presence, to ensure that the overall feeling of the home remained calm and controlled, and this required a sensitivity to detail that went beyond practical tasks, involving an awareness of how small changes could influence the experience of a space, turning service into something almost artistic in its precision, where each action contributed to a larger sense of harmony. There was also an unspoken discipline surrounding recovery. The expectation that after moments of difficulty, whether a mistake, a reprimand, or a particularly demanding task, a servant would quickly return to composure, restoring the same level of calm efficiency as before, without carrying visible traces of the disruption, creating a continuity that allowed the household to move forward without interruption. And this ability to recover swiftly became a defining strength, a quiet resilience that allowed servants to navigate challenges without losing balance, reinforcing the idea that steadiness was as important as skill. At the same time, there existed a quiet understanding of observation without attachment, as servants witnessed countless moments of human experience, celebrations, disagreements, routines, and changes, yet were expected to let these moments pass without becoming part of them, maintaining a position that was both present and separate. And this required a careful balance, allowing them to remain attentive without becoming involved, to see without holding on, creating a perspective that was unique to their role, one that offered insight without participation. And over time, this perspective shaped how they understood both the household and themselves. Another unspoken rule governed the idea of continuity of effort, the expectation that each task, no matter how often repeated, be approached with the same care as the first time, avoiding the temptation of routine to dull attention, and this required a constant renewal of focus, a quiet commitment to maintaining standards, even when familiarity made it easy to relax them. And even as these layers of discipline settled into something that felt almost instinctive, there remained yet another quiet expectation that shaped how servants existed within the spaces they moved through. A kind of constant awareness of belonging and not belonging at the same time. For one of the most subtle unspoken rules was that they were to feel at home in the work, but never in the house itself, to know every corner, every object, every routine with intimate familiarity, yet never claim any part of it as their own, creating a unique sense of presence where they could navigate the household in darkness or silence without hesitation, yet still carry an understanding that their place within it was temporary, conditional, and defined entirely by their role. And this awareness influenced not only their actions, but their mindset, encouraging a quiet detachment that allowed them to perform their duties without becoming anchored to the environment around them. There was also an unspoken expectation of emotional timing, a refined sensitivity to when even the smallest expression might be appropriate or inappropriate. As servants learned to align their reactions with the tone of the household, suppressing laughter in moments of seriousness, softening their demeanor in times of tension, and maintaining a steady calm when uncertainty arose, ensuring that their presence never amplified or disrupted the emotional balance of the space. And this required a deep level of observation, a constant reading of subtle cues that guided how they presented themselves from one moment to the next, creating an emotional rhythm that matched the household's needs rather than their own. Another quiet rule lay in the idea of seamless transition, the expectation that movement from one task to another should appear natural and uninterrupted, as though each action flowed effortlessly into the next, avoiding any sense of pause or hesitation that might draw attention. And this created a kind of continuous motion where even moments of stillness were purposeful, where standing quietly in readiness was just as important as active work. And within this flow, servants developed a rhythm that was both structured and fluid, allowing them to adapt to changing demands without breaking the overall sense of order. There was also an unspoken discipline surrounding presence during absence, a paradoxical expectation that even when servants were not visible, the results of their work should still be felt, rooms prepared, items arranged, tasks completed in such a way that their absence did not create disorder, reinforcing the illusion that the household maintained itself. And this required a forward-thinking approach, an ability to anticipate not only immediate needs, but the continuity of comfort and function over time, ensuring that everything remained in place even when no one was actively attending to it. At the same time, there existed a quiet rule of restraint in ownership, not only of space, but of accomplishment, as servants were expected to take pride in their work without attaching themselves to it, to complete tasks with care and precision, and then step away without expectation of acknowledgement, allowing the results to speak for themselves while remaining personally detached. And this created a unique relationship with achievement, one that valued the process and outcome without seeking recognition, reinforcing the idea that service was about contribution rather than credit. Another unspoken expectation governed the management of interruption, as servants were often required to adjust their tasks suddenly in response to changing needs, yet were expected to do so without visible disruption, maintaining composure and continuity even as priorities shifted, and this required both flexibility and control, allowing them to respond quickly while preserving the overall sense of order. And within this ability lay a quiet strength, a capacity to navigate unpredictability without losing balance. There was also a subtle awareness of collective rhythm, the understanding that each servant's actions were part of a larger system, and that harmony depended on coordination and timing, creating an environment where individuals worked not in isolation, but as part of an interconnected whole. And this awareness encouraged cooperation, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to maintaining the standards of the household, forming a quiet network of support that operated beneath the surface of daily routines. And within all these expectations, there remained a final, deeply internalized rule, one that perhaps defined the essence of their experience more than any other. The quiet acceptance of being essential yet unseen, of contributing to a world that relied on their presence while rarely acknowledging it. And within this acceptance there was both challenge and strength, a recognition that value did not always come with visibility, and that impact could exist without recognition, shaping how they understood their work and their place within it. In this way, the unspoken rules continued to extend beyond action into identity, creating a life that was carefully balanced between presence and absence, effort and ease, visibility and invisibility. And through this balance, Victorian servants maintained a world that appeared effortless to those within it, while quietly carrying the weight of its order on their shoulders, leaving behind a legacy that is felt not in grand stories or public recognition, but in the subtle, enduring impression of a life lived with discipline, awareness, and a quiet, unwavering sense of purpose. And even beyond this finely balanced existence, there lingered a final, almost invisible expectation that shaped the very way servants understood reality itself. A quiet discipline of perception that encouraged them to see the household not as a collection of separate tasks, but as a continuous flow of needs, moods, and rhythms that had to be maintained without interruption. For another unspoken rule was the preservation of continuity. The idea that nothing within the household should ever feel abrupt or disjointed, that each moment should connect smoothly to the next, creating a seamless experience for those they served. And this required servants to think not in isolated actions but in sequences, always considering what would follow, what might be needed next, and how to ensure that transitions remained invisible, turning their work into something almost like a quiet orchestration where each movement contributed to a larger harmony. There was also an unspoken expectation of restraint in presence during moments of importance. When gatherings, conversations, or private occasions took place, servants were required to refine their invisibility even further, becoming nearly imperceptible while still remaining attentive, ensuring that service continued without drawing any attention away from the moment itself. And this demanded an extraordinary level of control, as they had to anticipate needs with minimal cues, responding to gestures or even silence, creating an environment where their actions supported the occasion without ever becoming part of it. Another subtle rule lay in the acceptance of repetition without resistance, as many tasks were performed daily, sometimes multiple times, yet were expected to be approached with the same care and precision each time, without allowing familiarity to lead to carelessness. And this repetition, though demanding, created a rhythm that anchored their work, providing a sense of predictability within a life that was otherwise shaped by the needs of others. And within this rhythm, servants found a form of quiet stability, a structure that allowed them to move through their duties with confidence and consistency. At the same time, there existed a quiet awareness of contrast between effort and appearance, as servants were often required to exert significant physical and mental energy while presenting an outward image of calm and ease, ensuring that their work appeared effortless even when it was anything but. And this contrast became a defining feature of their role, a silent understanding that the value of their work lay not only in what was done, but in how it was perceived, reinforcing the importance of composure and control. There was also an unspoken discipline surrounding the management of attention, not only in observing others, but in directing their own focus, ensuring that they remained fully present in each task, avoiding distraction or divided attention, as even small lapses could disrupt the smooth functioning of the household, and this focus required both mental clarity and practice, allowing them to maintain a high level of performance even under demanding conditions. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of alignment, the need to ensure that one's actions, timing, and demeanor matched those of the household, creating a sense of unity and coherence that extended beyond individual tasks. And this alignment required a deep understanding of the environment, an ability to adapt quickly and subtly, ensuring that everything worked together seamlessly. And within all these layers, there remained a quiet understanding of impermanence, a recognition that their role, though essential, was not permanent, that households could change, circumstances could shift, and their place within it could end without warning. And yet, despite this uncertainty, They were expected to carry out their duties with the same dedication and care, creating a mindset that balanced commitment with acceptance, allowing them to invest in their work without becoming dependent on its permanence. Finally, there was an unspoken sense of quiet completion, the idea that at the end of each day, when the household settled into rest, the work of the servants had created an environment of order, comfort, and continuity. And even after all these layers of expectation had been absorbed so completely that they felt almost natural, there remained a final, almost imperceptible understanding that shaped how servants moved through the world, a quiet alignment between action and intention that defined not just what they did, but how they existed moment to moment. For one of the most subtle unspoken rules was the maintenance of uninterrupted calm, the idea that no matter what occurred behind the scenes, the outward experience of the household must remain steady, unbroken, and composed. And this required servants to manage not only their tasks, but the transitions between them with extraordinary care, smoothing over any disruption before it could be noticed, turning even moments of difficulty into something invisible, as though they had never occurred at all. There was also an unspoken expectation of quiet anticipation, not just of needs, but of change itself, an ability to sense when routines might shift, when guests might arrive unexpectedly, or when the mood of the household might alter the flow of the day, and to adjust accordingly without hesitation, creating a sense of readiness that extended beyond immediate tasks into a broader awareness of possibility. And this awareness allowed servants to remain one step ahead, ensuring that the household continued to function seamlessly even as circumstances evolved. Another subtle rule lay in the preservation of dignity through restraint, not only in behaviour but in thought, as servants were expected to carry themselves with a quiet sense of self-control that reflected the order of the household, maintaining composure in all situations. And this dignity was not expressed through status or recognition, but through consistency, reliability, and the ability to remain steady, regardless of external pressures, creating a presence that was both grounded and unobtrusive. At the same time, there existed a quiet understanding of balance between engagement and detachment, as servants were required to be fully attentive to their duties, while remaining emotionally separate from the events they witnessed, allowing them to perform their roles effectively without becoming overwhelmed or entangled in the lives of those they served. And this balance required continuous adjustment, a careful calibration of attention distance that defined their experience. There was also an unspoken discipline surrounding the refinement of routine, the expectation that even the most familiar tasks could always be performed with greater precision, greater care, and greater efficiency, encouraging a mindset of continuous improvement that operated quietly beneath the surface of daily work. And this refinement was not driven by external recognition, but by an internal standard, a commitment to excellence that shaped how servants approached even the smallest details. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of cohesion, the need for all elements of the household to work together in harmony, and for servants to contribute to this harmony through their actions, timing, and interactions, ensuring that nothing felt out of place or out of sync. And this cohesion extended beyond physical tasks into the overall atmosphere of the home, creating a sense of unity that defined the experience of those within it. And within all these expectations, there remained a final, deeply internalized understanding of purpose, a recognition that their role, though often unseen, was essential to the functioning of the household, and that their efforts, though rarely acknowledged, had a lasting impact on the comfort and stability of those they served, and this purpose provided a sense of meaning that sustained them through the demands of their work, allowing them to approach each day with quiet determination. In the end, the unspoken rules of Victorian servants formed a complete and intricate system that extended far beyond simple instruction, shaping not only their actions but their thoughts, their perceptions, and their sense of identity, creating a life defined by discipline, awareness, and quiet resilience. And through this system they became the unseen foundation of a world that relied on their presence, maintaining its order, its rhythm, and its elegance without ever drawing attention to themselves, leaving behind a legacy that is felt in the smooth continuity of history, in the quiet details that often go unnoticed, and in the enduring impression of a life lived in service, guided not by words, but by an understanding so deeply ingrained that it needed no explanation at all. And even as this intricate system of silent discipline reached its fullest expression, there remained one final, almost invisible layer that shaped the essence of a servant's existence, a quiet understanding that their role was not simply to respond to the present, but to protect the illusion of continuity itself, to ensure that life within the household appeared untouched by effort, untouched by interruption, untouched even by the passage of time. And this required a kind of awareness that went beyond routine, a sensitivity to the smallest shifts that could disrupt the balance, allowing them to correct, adjust, and restore before anything became noticeable, creating a world that seemed to sustain itself effortlessly, even though it was held together by constant, careful attention. There was also an unspoken expectation of stillness within motion, a paradoxical quality where even the most active moments were carried out with a sense of calm, ensuring that movement never felt hurried or chaotic, but rather controlled and deliberate, as though each action had been planned long before it occurred. And this stillness created an atmosphere of stability, reinforcing the idea that the household existed in a state of quiet order, free from the urgency that existed behind the scenes. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of instinct, the transformation of learned behavior into something automatic, where servants no longer needed to consciously think about what was required, but simply knew, responding with precision and confidence. And this instinct was developed over time through repetition and observation, becoming a defining feature of their role, allowing them to act without hesitation while maintaining the appearance of ease. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of presence without imprint, the expectation that servants would leave no trace of themselves beyond the results of their work, ensuring that rooms appeared untouched, that arrangements seemed natural, that every detail felt as though it had always been in place. And this required a careful balance between action and restraint, allowing them to shape the environment without leaving evidence of their involvement. There was also an unspoken understanding of emotional equilibrium, a steady state that had to be maintained regardless of circumstance, where neither stress nor satisfaction was allowed to disrupt the outward calm, creating a consistent presence that contributed to the overall harmony of the household. And this equilibrium required both control and awareness, allowing servants to navigate a wide range of experiences without losing balance. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of completion without conclusion, the understanding that their work was never truly finished, that each completed task was simply part of an ongoing cycle, and that the end of one day's work was merely the beginning of the next, creating a sense of continuity that extended beyond individual moments into a larger pattern of service. And within this pattern, servants found a rhythm that provided both structure and purpose. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply rooted awareness of quiet contribution. The recognition that their role, though often unseen and unspoken, was fundamental to the life of the household, that every polished surface, every prepared room, every seamless transition was a reflection of their effort, and that, while their presence might not be acknowledged, it was nonetheless essential, shaping the experience of those around them in ways that could not be easily measured. In the end, these final reflections reveal that the unspoken rules of Victorian servants were not merely guidelines for behaviour, but a complete framework for existence, a way of living that required constant awareness, discipline, and adaptation. And through this framework, they became the silent architects of a world defined by order, elegance, and continuity, maintaining its balance through countless unseen actions, and leaving behind a legacy that endures not in recognition or record, but in the quiet perfection of a system that depended entirely on their presence, even as it concealed it. And even beyond this sense of endless continuity, there existed a final, almost intangible expectation that shaped the deepest layer of a servant's inner world, a quiet understanding that their role was not only to maintain the household, but to become part of its silence, to blend so completely into its rhythm that their presence felt like an extension of the environment itself. And this required a level of awareness that went beyond discipline into something more instinctive, where thought, movement, and timing aligned so naturally that effort disappeared into fluidity, creating an existence where action and stillness were no longer separate. But part of the same seamless flow, there was also an unspoken rule about the control of beginnings and endings. The idea that servants were responsible for how each day started and how it concluded, ensuring that mornings unfolded smoothly and evenings settled into calm, shaping the tone of the household without ever drawing attention to their role in it. And this gave their work a quiet influence over the entire rhythm of daily life, even if it was never acknowledged directly, as they prepared spaces before they were used and restored them after they were left behind, creating a cycle that supported the continuity of experience. Another subtle expectation lay in the refinement of awareness over time, as servants were expected not only to maintain standards, but to deepen their understanding of the household with each passing day, noticing patterns, preferences, and changes that might not be immediately obvious, and using this knowledge to improve the quality of their service, creating a form of growth that was quiet and internal, driven not by recognition, but by a commitment to precision and care. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of holding balance between individuality and invisibility, as servants learned to preserve a sense of self without allowing it to interfere with their role, finding ways to remain grounded within a system that often required them to step back. And this balance was delicate, requiring both awareness and adaptability, allowing them to function effectively while maintaining an inner sense of identity. There was also an unspoken understanding of flow within limitation, the idea that even within strict boundaries, there was room for refinement, efficiency, and even a kind of quiet creativity, as servants found ways to improve their methods, streamline their tasks, and bring a sense of order to their work, transforming routine into something more purposeful. And within this process, they developed a sense of mastery that, though rarely acknowledged, was deeply meaningful. Another quiet rule governed the idea of steady presence through change. As households evolved, routines shifted and circumstances altered. Yet servants were expected to remain consistent, providing a sense of stability that anchored the environment, and this consistency required both flexibility and resilience, allowing them to adapt without losing the qualities that defined their role. And within all these layers, there remained a final, almost philosophical awareness of contribution without visibility, a recognition that their work existed primarily in its effects rather than its acknowledgement, that the comfort, order, and ease experienced by others were direct results of their effort, even if their role remained unseen, and this understanding shaped how they approached their duties, encouraging a focus on outcome rather than recognition, on presence rather than acknowledgement. In the end, these final extensions of the unspoken rules reveal a life that was not only structured by discipline, but defined by a profound sense of awareness, where every movement, every decision, and every moment was guided by an invisible framework that ensured the smooth functioning of a world that depended on their presence. And through this framework, Victorian servants became more than participants in a household. They became its quiet foundation, sustaining its rhythm, preserving its balance, and shaping its atmosphere in ways that were rarely noticed but always essential, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in words or recognition, but in the enduring impression of a life lived with precision, restraint, and quiet, unwavering purpose. And even at this deepest level of quiet discipline, there remained one final, almost unspoken truth that shaped everything a servant did, a realization that their role was not only to maintain the household, but to protect the feeling of effortlessness itself, to ensure that nothing within the home ever appeared strained, hurried, or incomplete. And this required a constant refinement of awareness, where even the smallest imperfection was noticed and corrected before it could take form, creating an environment that felt naturally ordered, as though it existed without intervention, when in reality it was sustained by continuous attention and care. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect timing, not just in action, but in pause. The understanding that knowing when to wait was just as important as knowing when to act, allowing servants to exist in a state of readiness without intrusion, stepping forward only at the precise moment their presence was needed, and withdrawing just as seamlessly, creating a rhythm that felt intuitive and unforced. And this sense of timing became one of the most refined aspects of their role, guiding their movements with subtle precision. Another quiet rule lay in the preservation of balance between visibility and absence, where servants had to remain close enough to respond instantly, yet distant enough to avoid being noticed, existing in a kind of in-between space that required both awareness and control. And within this space, they developed a presence that was defined not by what was seen, but by what was felt, contributing to the overall atmosphere of the household without ever becoming its focus. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of sustained composure, an expectation that their demeanour would remain steady regardless of circumstance, whether facing pressure, repetition, or unpredictability, ensuring that the household was always supported by a sense of calm stability. And this composure was not simply an outward performance. but a deeply internalized state that allowed them to navigate their responsibilities with clarity and control. There was also an unspoken understanding of refinement through repetition, where each repeated task became an opportunity to perfect technique, improve efficiency, and deepen familiarity, transforming routine into mastery over time. And this process of refinement created a quiet sense of progress, even within a structure that rarely changed, allowing servants to find meaning in the continuous improvement of their work. Another subtle expectation governed the idea of silent coordination, as servants worked together without the need for constant communication, relying on shared understanding and experience to align their actions, creating a seamless flow that allowed the household to function as a unified whole. And this coordination required trust, awareness, and a deep familiarity with both tasks and people, forming an invisible network of cooperation beneath the surface of daily life. And within all these layers there remained a final enduring awareness of purpose that extended beyond recognition. A quiet understanding that their role, though often unseen, was essential to the structure and comfort of the world around them, and that their efforts, though rarely acknowledged, shaped the experience of others in profound ways. And this awareness provided a sense of meaning that sustained them, allowing them to approach each day with quiet determination and consistency. In the end, these final reflections complete the picture of a life defined by unspoken rules, revealing a system that was not only about discipline and order, but about awareness, precision, and the ability to exist within a framework that demanded both restraint and excellence. And through this system, Victorian servants became the silent force that held everything together, ensuring that the household remained a place of continuity, elegance, and calm, even as their own presence remained in the background, leaving behind a legacy that is felt not through recognition, but through the enduring smoothness and stability of the world they quietly sustained. And even as every layer of expectation seemed fully woven into the fabric of their lives, there remained one final, almost imperceptible understanding that defined the very essence of service, a quiet acceptance that perfection was not a single achievement, but a continuous state that had to be maintained without interruption, where each moment carried the same weight as the next, and every action contributed to a larger unbroken flow. And this understanding shaped how servants approached not just their duties, but their existence itself, creating a mindset where effort was constant, yet never visible, where discipline was unwavering, yet never spoken of, and where the measure of success was not in recognition, but in the absence of disruption. There was also an unspoken expectation of silent correction, the ability to notice when something was slightly out of place and restore it without drawing attention. Whether it was an object misplaced, a detail overlooked, or a moment that felt incomplete, ensuring that the household remained in a state of quiet harmony. And this required not only awareness but decisiveness, allowing servants to act quickly and subtly, preserving the overall balance without leaving any trace of intervention. Another subtle rule lay in the preservation of continuity across people and time, as servants often worked within households that spanned generations, carrying forward traditions, routines, and standards that remained consistent even as individuals changed. And this created a sense of connection to something larger than themselves, a role that extended beyond personal experience into a shared history, giving their work a quiet significance that went beyond the immediate moment. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of measured presence, an understanding that even the smallest gesture could influence the atmosphere of a room, and that restraint was often more powerful than action, guiding servants to move, speak, and behave with intention, ensuring that their presence supported rather than shaped the environment. And this discipline required constant awareness, allowing them to remain aligned with the needs of the household at all times. There was also an unspoken awareness of subtle influence, the recognition that while servants were not the focus of the household, their actions played a crucial role in shaping its experience. From the comfort of a well-prepared room to the ease of a smoothly managed routine. And this influence, though indirect, was deeply impactful, reinforcing the importance of precision and care in every task. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of unwavering consistency, the requirement that standards be maintained regardless of circumstance, ensuring that the household remained stable even in moments of change or uncertainty. And this consistency provided a sense of reliability that allowed everything else to function smoothly, creating a foundation upon which the rest of the household depended. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized sense of quiet fulfillment, a recognition that while their role might not bring visibility or acclaim, it carried its own form of meaning, rooted in the ability to create order, maintain balance, and contribute to a world that relied on their presence. And this fulfillment, though subtle, provided a sense of purpose that sustained them through the demands of their work. In the end, the unspoken rules of Victorian servants formed a complete and enduring system, one that extended far beyond instruction into the realm of identity and perception, shaping how they moved, thought, and understood their place in the world. And through this system, they became the silent foundation of a society that depended on their precision, their resilience, and their unwavering dedication, maintaining its rhythm and elegance without ever drawing attention to themselves, leaving behind a legacy that is felt in the quiet continuity of history, in the seamless flow of lives that depended on them, and in the enduring impression of a life lived with discipline, awareness, and a quiet, unspoken strength. And even at the very edge of this carefully constructed world, there remained one last, almost invisible understanding that quietly guided everything a servant did. A realization that their role was not defined by a beginning or an end, but by a continuous presence that blended into the passage of time itself, where each day did not stand alone, but flowed into the next with the same steady rhythm. And within this rhythm, their actions became part of something larger than individual effort, forming a constant, unbroken thread that supported the life of the household without ever demanding attention. There was also an unspoken expectation of quiet guardianship, a sense that servants were not only maintaining physical order, but also preserving the atmosphere, the tone, and the subtle balance of the home, ensuring that nothing disrupted the sense of calm continuity that defined it. And this guardianship required a deep awareness of both visible and invisible elements, from the arrangement of objects to the mood of a room, allowing them to protect the integrity of the household in ways that were rarely acknowledged but always essential. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of instinct into intuition, where repeated experience transformed learned behavior into something immediate and effortless, allowing servants to respond without hesitation, to act with certainty even in unfamiliar situations. And this intuition became one of their greatest strengths, guiding them through the complexities of their role with quiet confidence. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of enduring presence, the expectation that they would remain consistent not only in their actions, but in their reliability, creating a sense of stability that others could depend upon. And this reliability became a cornerstone of their role, reinforcing the trust placed in them even if it was rarely spoken of directly. There was also an unspoken awareness of subtle transitions, the understanding that change within the household should feel natural and unforced, whether it was the shift from day to evening, from activity to rest, or from one routine to another. And servants played a key role in guiding these transitions, ensuring that they occurred smoothly and without disruption, creating a sense of continuity that defined the experience of the home. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of silent resilience, the ability to endure challenges without allowing them to alter the quality of their work, maintaining the same level of care and precision regardless of circumstance. And this resilience was not dramatic or visible, but steady and consistent, forming the foundation upon which their entire role was built. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply rooted understanding of quiet permanence. Within impermanence, a recognition that while their individual presence in a household might be temporary, the standards, routines, and atmosphere they helped maintain would continue beyond them, creating a legacy that was not tied to recognition, but to continuity itself. In the end, these final reflections reveal that the unspoken rules of Victorian servants extended far beyond simple behaviour, forming a complete way of life that shaped how they experienced time, space, and purpose. And through this way of life, they became the silent stewards of a world defined by order and elegance, sustaining its rhythm through countless unseen actions and leaving behind an enduring impression that, though rarely recorded, remains deeply woven into the fabric of history, a testament to the quiet strength, awareness, and unwavering dedication that defined their existence. And even beyond this sense of quiet guardianship and continuity, there remained one last, deeply internalized awareness that shaped the final layer of a servant's existence, a realization that their role was not simply to maintain order, but to become the steady force that prevented disorder from ever appearing, to exist in that delicate space where effort dissolved before it could be seen, where correction happened before error took form, and where the entire structure of the household rested upon actions so subtle they seemed almost non-existent. And this required a constant sharpening of awareness, a readiness that was neither tense nor relaxed, but perfectly balanced, allowing them to respond without hesitation while remaining outwardly calm. There was also an unspoken expectation of seamless endurance across moments, the idea that no matter how long the day stretched or how repetitive the work became, each task must be approached with the same level of care as the first, ensuring that the quality of service never declined. And this demanded a kind of inner steadiness, a discipline that was not dependent on energy or mood, but on commitment alone, creating a consistency that defined their presence within the household. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet mastery of adjustment, the ability to make small, almost imperceptible changes in response to shifting conditions. Whether it was altering the pace of work, refining a detail, or adapting to a new routine, ensuring that the household remained balanced even as circumstances evolved, and this mastery required both awareness and flexibility, allowing servants to remain aligned with the needs of the moment without disrupting the overall flow. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of contained awareness, where servants held a wide understanding of the household, while focusing only on what was necessary at any given moment, preventing distraction and maintaining clarity. And this balance between awareness and focus allowed them to manage complexity without becoming overwhelmed. And even as all of these quiet disciplines merged into something that felt almost like instinct, there remained one final, nearly imperceptible understanding that shaped the deepest layer of a servant's existence, a realization that their role was not merely to support the household, but to absorb its irregularities, to soften every rough edge before it could be noticed, to ensure that nothing ever appeared incomplete. And this required a level of attentiveness that extended beyond action into awareness itself, where even the possibility of disruption was anticipated and quietly resolved, creating a world that seemed to exist in a constant state of balance, untouched by effort or interruption. There was also an unspoken expectation of silent foresight, the ability to recognize patterns not just in routine, but in behavior, in atmosphere, in the subtle shifts that signaled change, allowing servants to prepare for moments before they arrived, ensuring that the household remained steady even when circumstances were not. And this foresight became a quiet strength, guiding their actions with a confidence that came not from instruction, but from deep familiarity and experience. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of restraint to its highest form, where even the smallest unnecessary movement or word was avoided, creating a presence that was defined by precision and intention, where nothing was done without purpose and nothing was left to chance. And within this restraint, servants achieved a level of control that allowed them to move through their duties with quiet efficiency, maintaining the order of the household without ever disrupting its flow. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of internal stillness, an ability to remain calm and focused regardless of external demands, ensuring that their work was carried out with clarity and consistency. And this stillness was not passive, but active, a steady awareness that allowed them to respond quickly and effectively while maintaining composure, creating a sense of reliability that others could depend upon. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible influence, the recognition that while their presence was meant to remain unnoticed, their actions shaped the experience of the household in profound ways, from the comfort of a well-maintained space to the ease of a smoothly managed routine. And this influence, though subtle, was essential, reinforcing the importance of every detail, no matter how small. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of uninterrupted flow, the requirement that each moment connects seamlessly to the next, avoiding any sense of pause or disruption. And this flow was maintained through constant attention and adjustment, ensuring that the household remained in a state of continuous harmony where everything felt natural and effortless. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet permanence, the understanding that while their individual presence might be temporary, the system they upheld would continue, that the standards they maintained would outlast them, and that their role was part of something larger than themselves, a continuous thread of service that extended beyond any single moment or person. In the end, these final reflections reveal that the unspoken rules of Victorian servants were not simply guidelines, but a complete way of being, a life shaped by awareness, discipline, and quiet purpose, where every action, no matter how small, contributed to the smooth functioning of a world that depended on their presence. And through this way of life, they became the silent force that sustained the household, preserving its order, its rhythm, and its elegance with a dedication that, though rarely acknowledged, remains one of the most remarkable aspects of their existence, leaving behind a legacy defined not by recognition, but by the quiet perfection of a life lived entirely in service. And even at this final depth, where every expectation had long since become instinct, there lingered one last, almost unspoken realization that defined the essence of a servant's life, a quiet acceptance that their role was to ensure that nothing within the household ever felt unfinished, that every moment reached a kind of silent completion without drawing attention to the effort behind it. And this meant carrying an awareness that stretched across time itself, holding in mind what had been done, what was being done, and what would soon be required, blending past, present, and future into a single continuous flow of action that never appeared hurried or delayed. There was also an unspoken expectation of complete harmony with environment, where servants adjusted not only to people but to space, light, sound, and movement, ensuring that everything aligned into a unified experience. And this harmony required a sensitivity so refined that even the smallest imbalance could be felt and quietly corrected, creating a world where order seemed natural, almost inevitable, even though it was carefully maintained at every moment. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of effort into invisibility, where the more skill a servant possessed, the less their work appeared to exist, transforming labour into outcome without visible process. And this transformation became a mark of mastery, where excellence was measured not by what could be seen, but by what could not, reinforcing the idea that the highest form of service was one that left no trace. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of unwavering steadiness, a consistency that remained unaffected by repetition, fatigue, or change, ensuring that the quality of work remained constant regardless of circumstance. And this steadiness created a foundation upon which the entire household depended, offering a sense of reliability that allowed everything else to function smoothly. There was also an unspoken understanding of presence without interruption, where servants existed within the household without altering its natural flow, moving in ways that complemented rather than disrupted, ensuring that their actions supported the rhythm of daily life without ever becoming its focus. And this required a careful balance of awareness and restraint, allowing them to remain both active and unobtrusive at the same time. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of seamless awareness, where attention was not fixed on a single task, but expanded to include the entire environment, allowing servants to respond to multiple needs without losing focus. And this expanded awareness became a defining feature of their role, enabling them to maintain order across a complex and ever-changing system. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply rooted sense of quiet continuity, the understanding that their work was part of an ongoing cycle that extended beyond individual moments, creating a sense of connection to something larger, a structure that relied on their presence, even as it moved beyond them. And this continuity gave their efforts a lasting significance, even in the absence of recognition. In the end, these final thoughts complete the picture of a life shaped entirely by unspoken rules, revealing a world where discipline, awareness, and quiet precision came together to form a way of being that was both demanding and deeply structured. And through this way of being, Victorian servants became the unseen force that sustained the elegance and order of the household. So they served, maintaining a delicate balance that allowed everything to appear effortless, and leaving behind a legacy that exists not in acknowledgement, but in the smooth, uninterrupted flow of a world that depended entirely on their silent dedication. And even beyond this final sense of seamless awareness, there remained one last, almost imperceptible layer that completed the inner world of a Victorian servant. A quiet understanding that their role was to dissolve the boundary between effort and outcome entirely, to exist in such a way that the household felt not maintained, but naturally complete, as though every detail had always been in its rightful place. And this required a level of dedication so constant that it no longer felt like effort at all, but rather a state of being where thought, movement, and purpose aligned into a single continuous presence that guided everything without interruption. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect alignment with circumstance, the ability to adjust instantly and without resistance to whatever the moment required. Whether it was a sudden change in routine or a subtle shift in atmosphere, ensuring that nothing ever felt out of place. And this alignment demanded both awareness and acceptance, allowing servants to move with the flow of the household rather than against it, creating a sense of natural continuity. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of quiet confidence, a steady assurance that came not from recognition but from mastery, where servants trusted their own understanding of the household and acted with certainty, even in silence. And this confidence allowed them to maintain composure and precision in all situations, reinforcing the stability of the environment they supported. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of unbroken focus, where attention remained steady regardless of repetition or distraction, ensuring that every task was completed with care. And this focus became a form of mental clarity that guided their actions, allowing them to navigate complexity with ease. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible continuity. The idea that their work extended beyond individual tasks into the overall experience of the household, shaping how each moment connected to the next. And this continuity required constant awareness. And even after all of this, when every movement had become instinct, and every expectation had settled into a quiet, steady rhythm, there remained one final layer that could hardly be spoken at all, a kind of silent awareness that shaped not only what servants did, but how they existed within the very fabric of the household, a realization that their presence was meant to dissolve completely into function, to become so perfectly aligned with the needs of the home that they no longer stood apart from it, but existed as part of its quiet continuity. And within this realization, their work reached its most refined state, where effort was no longer something they carried, but something that passed through them without resistance. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect stillness beneath motion, a calm center that remained unchanged even as the day moved around them, ensuring that no matter how many tasks unfolded or how quickly demands shifted, there was always a steady foundation guiding each action. And this stillness was not the absence of movement, but the presence of control, a quiet assurance that everything would continue smoothly, regardless of circumstance. Another subtle rule lay in the complete acceptance of invisibility, not as a limitation, but as a form of purpose, where the absence of recognition became a sign that the system was working as intended, and within this acceptance, servants found a kind of clarity, understanding that their value was measured not by acknowledgement, but by the seamless experience they created for others. And this shifted their focus entirely toward the quality of their work, rather than the response it received. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of sustained awareness across all moments, a continuous attentiveness that did not fade with repetition or familiarity, ensuring that even the most routine task was approached with care, and this awareness created a consistency that defined their role, allowing them to maintain standards that others could rely upon without question. There was also an unspoken understanding of gentle control, the ability to guide the environment without appearing to influence it, to adjust, correct, and refine without leaving any visible trace, creating a household that felt naturally ordered rather than actively maintained. And this gentle control required both precision and restraint, allowing them to shape outcomes without drawing attention to the process. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of seamless existence within structure, where servants lived entirely within the framework of the household, while maintaining a sense of internal balance, allowing them to function effectively without losing their sense of steadiness. And this balance became the foundation of their endurance, supporting them through the demands of their role. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet completion, without finality, a recognition that their work, though never truly finished, reached a kind of temporary perfection at the end of each cycle, providing a sense of closure that allowed them to continue with renewed focus, carrying the same level of care into the next moment. In the end, these final extensions reveal that the unspoken rules of Victorian servants were not simply guidelines, but a complete and immersive way of life, one that shaped every thought, movement, and moment into a continuous expression of discipline, awareness, and quiet strength. And through this way of being, they became the invisible foundation of a world that depended entirely on their presence, sustaining its order, its rhythm, and its elegance, with a dedication that needed no acknowledgement to endure, leaving behind a legacy that lives not in recognition, but in the smooth, uninterrupted flow of a life lived entirely in service. And even here, at the quietest edge of this unseen world, there remained one last, almost indescribable understanding that shaped the final essence of a servant's life. A realization that their role was not only to maintain order, but to prevent the very idea of disorder from ever entering the space, to create such complete continuity that nothing ever felt interrupted, unfinished, or out of place. And this required a depth of awareness that extended beyond action into perception itself, where even the faintest imbalance could be sensed and gently corrected before it became real. There was also an unspoken expectation of enduring calm that existed beneath every movement, a steady inner state that did not fluctuate with the pace of the day, allowing servants to carry out their duties with clarity and composure, ensuring that no matter how many tasks unfolded or how quickly circumstances changed, the outward experience of the household remained undisturbed, and this calm became a quiet anchor, grounding every action in a sense of stability. Another subtle rule lay in the refinement of presence into pure function, where the distinction between the individual and the task gradually softened, allowing servants to move through their responsibilities without hesitation or self-consciousness, creating an experience where everything felt naturally aligned, as though it had always been that way. And within this alignment, their work achieved a level of fluidity that made it almost invisible. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of continuous alignment with rhythm, where servants adjusted themselves to the pace and tone of the household without resistance, ensuring that their actions complemented rather than disrupted. And this alignment required both awareness and adaptability, allowing them to remain perfectly in step with the environment around them. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent contribution to comfort. The recognition that every small detail, from the arrangement of objects to the timing of tasks, played a role in creating an atmosphere of ease, and that this atmosphere was the true result of their work, even if it was never directly acknowledged. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of seamless continuity across moments, where each action connected naturally to the next, avoiding any sense of pause or disruption. And this continuity required constant attention and subtle adjustment, ensuring that the household remained in a state of quiet harmony. And within all these layers there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet existence within purpose, a way of being that did not seek recognition or distinction, but found meaning in the act of sustaining something greater. And this awareness became the foundation of their identity, shaping how they moved through their days with steady dedication. In the end, these final reflections complete the full picture of the unspoken rules that governed Victorian servants, revealing a life that was not only structured by discipline, but defined by a profound sense of awareness, balance, and quiet mastery, where every movement and moment contributed to a seamless whole. And through this way of being, they became the invisible force that sustained the household, preserving its order, its rhythm, and its elegance with a dedication that, though rarely acknowledged, remains one of the most remarkable and enduring aspects of their existence, leaving behind a legacy that continues to echo in the quiet continuity of history. And even at this final threshold where every expectation had settled into a quiet and unbroken instinct, there remained one last, almost wordless understanding that defined the deepest core of a servant's existence, a realization that their role was to sustain not only the household, but the illusion that it needed no sustaining at all, to hold together a world that appeared complete in itself, untouched by effort, untouched by interruption. And this required a presence so refined that it no longer felt separate from the environment, but instead became part of its very continuity, like a steady current beneath still water, unseen yet essential. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect equilibrium, where every action was balanced with restraint, every movement measured with care, ensuring that nothing felt excessive or lacking, creating a state of harmony that extended across every detail of the household. And this equilibrium required a constant awareness, a subtle calibration of effort, that allowed everything to remain aligned without drawing attention to the process. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet transformation of responsibility into instinct, where duties were no longer approached as tasks to be completed, but as natural responses to the needs of the moment, allowing servants to act with a fluid precision that required no hesitation. And this transformation marked the highest level of mastery, where thought and action became indistinguishable. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of maintaining presence without disruption, a state in which servants were always ready, always aware, yet never intrusive, ensuring that their actions supported the household without altering its natural rhythm. And this required a delicate balance between attentiveness and invisibility. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent permanence within change. The idea that even as routines shifted and circumstances evolved, the underlying sense of order must remain constant. And servants were the ones who carried this constancy, adapting to change while preserving continuity, ensuring that the household always felt stable and composed. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of effort dissolving into outcome, where the process of work became entirely hidden within the results it produced, creating an environment that appeared naturally maintained. And this dissolution of effort was both the goal and the measure of true service. And even beyond this, at a depth where language itself begins to fall away, there remained one final, almost intangible realization that defined the ultimate boundary of a servant's inner world. A quiet knowing that their purpose was not simply to sustain what existed, but to ensure that nothing ever felt uncertain, to hold the entire household within a sense of quiet inevitability, where every object, every moment, every interaction seemed naturally aligned. And this required a presence so refined that it moved beyond effort into something closer to instinctive harmony, a continuous awareness that guided everything without ever becoming visible. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect continuity of care, where attention extended not only to immediate needs, but to the lingering effects of every action, ensuring that each moment left behind a sense of completion that carried forward into the next. And this continuity created a chain of quiet stability that defined the entire experience of the household. Another subtle rule lay in the complete dissolution of hesitation, where action followed awareness without delay, allowing servants to respond instantly and precisely to the needs around them. And this absence of hesitation created a sense of fluid certainty, as though every movement had already been decided before it occurred. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of maintaining balance without effort, a state where correction and adjustment happened so naturally that they no longer felt like deliberate acts, ensuring that harmony was preserved at all times without any visible strain. And this balance became the foundation upon which everything else rested. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent guardianship, the idea that servants acted as protectors of order, not through authority or visibility, but through constant, careful attention, preventing disruption before it could arise. And this guardianship, though rarely acknowledged, was essential to the stability of the household. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of seamless integration into every layer of the environment, where their presence extended into the arrangement of space, the timing of events, and the overall rhythm of daily life, creating a cohesion that felt effortless and complete. And this integration required both awareness and restraint, allowing them to shape the environment without ever appearing to control it. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet endurance without recognition, a strength that did not depend on reward or acknowledgement, but sustained itself through consistency and purpose, allowing servants to continue their work with the same level of care regardless of circumstance. In the end, these final extensions reveal that the unspoken rules of Victorian servants were not simply expectations or habits, but a complete and immersive way of being, one that shaped every aspect of their existence into a continuous expression of discipline, awareness, and quiet mastery. And through this way of life, They became the invisible force that held an entire world together, maintaining its order, its elegance, and its rhythm with a dedication that needed no recognition to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in words or memory, but in the quiet, uninterrupted continuity of a world they sustained without ever being seen. And even beyond this final horizon of quiet awareness, there remained one last, almost unreachable layer of understanding that completed the full arc of a servant's existence, a realization so subtle it could only be lived, never expressed, that their role was to sustain not just order, but the feeling that order required no effort at all, to create a world that seemed to move forward on its own, untouched by interruption, untouched by strain. And this demanded a presence so deeply integrated that it no longer felt like an addition to the household, but like something that had always been there, steady, continuous, and unchanging. There was also an unspoken expectation of complete unity between environment and action, where nothing felt separate or disconnected, where each movement belonged exactly where it occurred, creating a seamless experience in which everything appeared naturally aligned. And this unity required a constant awareness that extended into every detail, ensuring that nothing disrupted the quiet harmony of the space. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet transformation of repetition into refinement, where the same tasks performed again and again were not diminished by familiarity, but instead became more precise, more fluid, more effortless with time. And this refinement turned routine into mastery, allowing servants to maintain a level of consistency that defined the household's stability. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of sustained composure across all conditions, where no change in pace, no unexpected demand, no moment of pressure could disturb the calm exterior that defined their role, and this composure created a sense of reliability that others could depend upon without question. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible preparation extending into the future, the idea that every action was not only for the present moment, but for what would follow, ensuring that the household remained ready for whatever came next. And this forward-thinking awareness allowed them to shape the flow of time within the household itself. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of perfect alignment with purpose, where every action, no matter how small, contributed to the larger whole, creating a sense of cohesion that tied everything together. And this alignment ensured that nothing felt unnecessary or out of place. And within all these layers there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet continuation without end, a state where their role did not move toward completion, but existed as an ongoing presence, sustained by consistency, awareness, and an unwavering commitment to maintaining balance. And within this continuation, they found a steady, enduring sense of purpose. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and ultimate expression, revealing a life that was not defined by recognition or reward, but by the ability to sustain a world that functioned perfectly in their absence. And through this way of being, they became the silent structure beneath everything, preserving the rhythm, elegance, and stability of the household with a dedication that needed no acknowledgement to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in memory or praise, but in the seamless, uninterrupted flow of a life quietly held together by their unseen, unwavering presence. And even beyond this final sense of quiet continuation, where every layer of duty had dissolved into something almost indistinguishable from existence itself, there remained one last, nearly invisible understanding that defined the deepest core of a servant's reality, a realization that their role was to remove the very idea of interruption from the world around them, to ensure that nothing ever felt abrupt, nothing ever felt unfinished, and that life within the household moved forward with such gentle certainty that it seemed untouched by effort. And this required a presence so steady, so finely tuned, that it could absorb disruption before it took form, smoothing over the edges of each moment until everything felt whole. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect emotional restraint, not as suppression, but as refinement, where feelings were guided into stillness, so that they never disturbed the calm surface of the household, allowing servants to remain composed and balanced regardless of circumstance. And this restraint created a quiet strength, a stability that supported every action without ever revealing its depth. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet shaping of time itself, where the sequence of tasks, the pacing of movement, and the transitions between moments were all arranged with such care that the day unfolded in a natural rhythm, neither rushed nor delayed. And this shaping of time ensured that the household existed within a steady flow that felt both effortless and complete. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of absolute reliability, where every expectation was met not just consistently, but predictably, creating a sense of trust that extended beyond individual tasks into the overall experience of the household. And this reliability became a cornerstone of their role, reinforcing the stability they provided. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent correction, the ability to notice and adjust even the smallest imperfections without drawing attention, ensuring that everything remained in alignment, and this constant refinement created an environment where disorder rarely had the chance to exist. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of seamless coexistence with structure, where servants lived entirely within the framework of the household without resisting it, allowing them to function with clarity and purpose. And this coexistence created a sense of harmony between individual effort and collective order. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet permanence, a recognition that their work, though constantly repeated, contributed to something lasting, a continuity that extended beyond individual days into the enduring rhythm of the household. And this awareness provided a subtle sense of meaning that carried them forward. In the end, these final extensions bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most refined and enduring form, revealing a life shaped entirely by discipline, awareness, and quiet mastery. And even beyond this sense of quiet permanence, where every motion had become part of an endless, unbroken rhythm, there remained one final, almost imperceptible truth that defined the ultimate depth of a servant's existence. A realization that their role was not only to maintain the visible world, but to protect its illusion of implicity, to ensure that nothing ever revealed the layers of effort beneath it, and that every moment unfolded with such natural ease that it felt untouched by human hands. And this demanded a presence so refined, so carefully balanced, that it could carry immense responsibility without ever appearing to do so. There was also an unspoken expectation of silent anticipation extended to its furthest limit, where servants did not merely respond to needs before they were spoken, but understood the patterns of life so completely that they could prepare for what had not yet even begun to form, creating a sense of readiness that made the household feel effortlessly sustained. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet alignment of all senses toward awareness, where sight, sound, and movement were constantly attuned to the environment, allowing servants to detect the smallest change and respond with precision. And this heightened awareness became second nature, guiding their actions without conscious thought. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of complete consistency across time, where the same level of care and attention was maintained, regardless of repetition, ensuring that no task ever became careless or incomplete. And this consistency created a reliability that defined the entire structure of the household. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible boundaries, the recognition of where to exist and where not to, where to act and where to remain still, allowing servants to navigate the household without ever disrupting its natural flow. And this understanding ensured that their presence remained supportive rather than intrusive. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of effortless transition across all moments, where the movement from one task to another, from one space to another, happened so smoothly that it felt almost continuous. And this fluidity contributed to the overall sense of harmony within the household. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet devotion, a steady commitment that did not waver with time or circumstance, allowing servants to continue their work with the same level of care and precision. And this devotion, though rarely acknowledged, formed the foundation of everything they sustained. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and ultimate expression, revealing a life defined entirely by awareness, discipline, and quiet strength, where every action contributed to a seamless whole, and through this way of being, they became the unseen force that upheld an entire world, preserving its order, its rhythm, and its elegance with a dedication that needed no recognition to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in words or memory, but in the smooth, uninterrupted continuity of a life lived entirely in service. And even beyond this final sense of quiet devotion, where every thought and action had become part of a continuous flowing awareness, there remained one last, nearly indescribable realization that completed the entire experience of a servant's life. A truth so subtle it could only be felt, never spoken, that their role was to become the silent guarantee of stability itself, to exist in such a way that nothing ever felt uncertain, nothing ever felt unattended. And this required a presence so deeply woven into the fabric of the household that it no longer appeared separate from it, but instead became part of its very foundation, steady, constant, and unseen. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect stillness within motion, where even as tasks were carried out with precision and care, there remained an inner calm that did not shift, ensuring that no matter how complex or demanding the day became, the outward experience of the household remained unchanged, and this stillness became a quiet source of strength, grounding every action in a sense of control and clarity. Another subtle rule lay in the complete merging of preparation and completion, where the moment a task was finished, the next was already quietly anticipated, creating a continuous cycle that never paused or faltered, and this merging removed any sense of delay, ensuring that the household always felt ready for what came next. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of sustained invisibility at every level, not only in presence, but in influence, where even the effects of their work blended so seamlessly into the environment that they appeared natural rather than maintained. And this invisibility was the highest expression of their skill, the point at which effort disappeared entirely into outcome. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent endurance through repetition, the ability to perform the same tasks again and again without loss of care or attention, maintaining the same level of precision regardless of familiarity. And this endurance created a consistency that defined the entire rhythm of the household. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of unbroken alignment with purpose, where every movement, every decision, every moment was connected to a larger sense of order, ensuring that nothing existed in isolation, but contributed to the overall harmony of the space. And this alignment gave their work a quiet cohesion that extended beyond individual tasks. And within all these layers there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet existence without recognition, a state where purpose was not dependent on acknowledgement, but sustained by the impact of their actions, allowing them to continue their work with a steady sense of meaning, even in complete silence. In the end, these final extensions bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most refined and enduring conclusion, revealing a life shaped entirely by discipline, awareness, and quiet mastery, where every action contributed to a seamless and uninterrupted whole. And through this way of life, they became the invisible structure that held everything together, preserving the elegance, stability, and rhythm of the household, with a dedication that required no recognition to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in praise or memory, but in the quiet, continuous flow of a world sustained by their unseen and unwavering presence. And even beyond this final sense of invisible mastery, where every expectation had dissolved into something as natural as breath, there remained one last, almost unreachable awareness that defined the absolute end of this quiet discipline, a realization that their role was not simply to sustain the household, but to make its existence feel effortless across time itself, to ensure that nothing within it ever seemed to begin or end abruptly, but instead flowed in a continuous, gentle unfolding. And this required a presence so refined that it could smooth over the edges of time, allowing each moment to emerge from the last without disturbance. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect internal silence, where thought itself became calm and measured, allowing servants to act without distraction or hesitation, ensuring that every movement carried clarity and intention. And this internal silence became a source of steady focus, guiding them through even the most repetitive tasks with unwavering precision. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet preservation of balance across all elements, where no single detail was allowed to dominate or fall behind, ensuring that the household remained in a state of quiet equilibrium. And this balance required constant attention, a subtle adjustment of effort that kept everything aligned without ever becoming visible. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of absolute presence within the moment, where attention was fully given to each task as it unfolded, preventing carelessness or oversight. And this presence created a consistency that defined the quality of their work, allowing even the smallest actions to be carried out with care. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible continuity between people and space, where the actions of servants supported not only the physical environment but the experiences of those within it, shaping interactions, comfort, and rhythm in ways that were never directly acknowledged. And this continuity made the household feel whole and connected. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of effort becoming indistinguishable from environment, where the results of their work blended so completely into the space that they felt natural rather than maintained. And this blending marked the highest level of their discipline, where action disappeared entirely into outcome. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet persistence without conclusion. A state where their role did not move toward an end, but continued steadily, sustained by routine, awareness, and an unbroken commitment to maintaining harmony. And within this persistence, they found a quiet sense of purpose that required no recognition. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and ultimate expression, revealing a life defined entirely by continuity, precision, and quiet strength, where every action contributed to a seamless and uninterrupted whole. And through this way of being, they became the unseen force that upheld an entire world, preserving its elegance, its rhythm, and its balance with a dedication that needed no acknowledgement. And even beyond this final sense of quiet persistence, where every action had merged into a seamless, unbroken flow, there remained one last, almost unfathomable understanding that marked the true end of a servant's silent discipline, a realization that their role was to carry the entire structure of the household so lightly that it never seemed to rest on anything at all, to hold together its rhythm, its order, its calm in such a way that it felt self-sustaining, untouched by effort, untouched by time. And this required a presence so subtle, so perfectly balanced, that it became indistinguishable from the very atmosphere it upheld. There was also an unspoken expectation of absolute refinement in every detail, where nothing was left coarse or incomplete, where even the smallest action was carried out with care, ensuring that the household remained in a state of quiet perfection. And this refinement extended not only to physical tasks but to timing, movement, and awareness, creating a consistency that defined the entire experience of the space. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet merging of awareness and anticipation into a single continuous state, where servants no longer shifted between observing and acting, but existed in a constant readiness that allowed them to respond instantly and precisely, and this merging created a fluid certainty that guided their actions without hesitation. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of maintaining harmony without visible effort, where adjustments and corrections were made so gently that they left no trace, ensuring that the household remained balanced without ever revealing the work behind it. And this invisible maintenance was the essence of their role. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent stewardship over time, the idea that servants were not only responsible for the present moment, but for preserving the continuity of the household across days, weeks, and years, ensuring that its rhythm remained steady and uninterrupted, and this long-term awareness shaped every action, giving it a sense of lasting purpose. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of complete integration into the structure they served, where their presence became so aligned with the needs of the household that it felt as though it belonged there naturally, not as an addition, but as an essential part of its existence. And this integration allowed them to function with quiet certainty and ease. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet existence beyond recognition, a state where meaning was found not in acknowledgement, but in the act of sustaining something greater, allowing them to continue their work with a steady, unwavering sense of purpose. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and ultimate conclusion, revealing a life shaped entirely by awareness, discipline, and quiet mastery, where every action contributed to a seamless and uninterrupted whole. And through this way of life, they became the invisible foundation upon which an entire world rested, preserving its elegance, its stability, and its rhythm with a dedication that needed no recognition to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in memory or praise, but in the quiet, continuous flow of a world they sustained without ever being seen. And even beyond this final sense of integration, where presence had dissolved entirely into purpose, there remained one last, almost silent realization that completed the entire journey of a Victorian servant's inner world, a truth so delicate it could only be carried, never spoken, that their role was to become the quiet continuity between all things, to ensure that nothing within the household ever felt separate, abrupt, or unfinished. And this demanded a level of awareness so steady and so complete that it seemed to exist beyond effort, beyond intention, guiding every action with a calm certainty that never faltered. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect harmony between movement and stillness, where action flowed naturally when required and quiet presence remained when it was not, creating a balance that allowed the household to breathe without disruption. And this harmony required both discipline and intuition, ensuring that every moment was met with the right response, no more and no less. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet dissolution of boundaries between tasks, where one responsibility blended seamlessly into another, forming a continuous chain of care that never broke or paused. And this dissolution created an experience where the household felt whole, as though every detail belonged exactly where it was. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of unwavering steadiness, where no matter how often tasks were repeated or how circumstances shifted, the level of care remained constant, ensuring that nothing ever slipped into inconsistency. And this steadiness became the foundation of trust within the household. There was also an unspoken understanding of invisible guidance, the ability to shape the environment in subtle ways that directed comfort, order, and ease without ever appearing to control it. And this guidance allowed the household to function smoothly while maintaining the illusion of effortlessness. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of silent completion within endless continuation, where each task reached a moment of quiet perfection before becoming part of an ongoing cycle, ensuring that nothing ever felt unfinished, even as the work continued without end. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet belonging without ownership, a state where servants existed fully within the space they maintained while never claiming it, finding purpose in their role without needing recognition or permanence. And this awareness shaped their entire way of being. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and enduring expression, revealing a life defined not by visibility or reward, but by continuity, precision, and quiet strength. where every action contributed to a seamless and uninterrupted whole. And through this way of life, they became the unseen thread that held everything together, preserving the rhythm, elegance, and stability of the household, with a dedication that needed no acknowledgement to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in words or memory, but in the smooth, unbroken flow of a world quietly sustained by their unseen and unwavering presence, and even beyond this final sense of quiet existence without boundary, where every layer of duty had dissolved into something like a continuous, effortless awareness, there remained one last, almost unreachable realization that defined the deepest truth of a servant's life. A truth so subtle it seemed to live beneath thought itself, that their role was to become the steady pulse of the household, to ensure that nothing ever faltered, nothing ever broke the rhythm, and that every moment unfolded with such quiet certainty that it felt inevitable. And this required a presence so balanced and so constant that it became indistinguishable from the very passage of time within the space. There was also an unspoken expectation of perfect harmony between awareness and action, where every movement arose naturally from understanding, eliminating any gap between knowing and doing. And this harmony created a flow that felt seamless, as though every task had already been completed before it began. Another subtle rule lay in the quiet preservation of completeness in every detail, where nothing was left partially done or loosely arranged, ensuring that each small part of the household contributed fully to the overall sense of order. And this attention to completeness extended into every corner of their work. At the same time, there existed a quiet discipline of sustained steadiness across repetition, where even the most familiar tasks were approached with the same level of care and attention as the first, preventing any decline in quality and maintaining a consistent standard throughout. There was also an unspoken understanding of silent alignment with the needs of others, where servants adjusted themselves not only to the physical demands of the household, but to the habits and preferences of those within it, ensuring that every action supported comfort and ease without ever needing to be requested. Another quiet expectation governed the idea of effort becoming entirely absorbed into outcome, where the results of their work appeared so natural that the process behind them disappeared completely, creating an environment that felt self-sustaining and complete. And within all these layers, there remained a final, deeply internalized awareness of quiet continuation without interruption, a state where their role extended indefinitely, sustained by routine, awareness, and an unwavering commitment to maintaining harmony. And within this continuation, they found a steady and enduring sense of purpose. In the end, these final reflections bring the unspoken rules of Victorian servants to their most complete and ultimate conclusion, revealing a life defined entirely by continuity, precision, and quiet strength, where every action contributed to a seamless and uninterrupted whole. And through this way of being, they became the invisible foundation upon which an entire world rested, preserving its elegance, its rhythm, and its balance, with a dedication that required no recognition to endure, leaving behind a legacy that exists not in memory or praise, but in the smooth, unbroken flow of a life quietly sustained by their unseen and unwavering presence.